No, she's not logged in. Is she in the other one?
Well, hello, everyone. I see we have a couple of members missing. City Clerk, do you know, are they going to join us?
Where it's, Councilmember Lamb is here. We're helping her get logged in, and I've not heard anything from Councilmember Carnevale. I can reach out to him though, if you'd like.
All right.
We've been having technical difficulties here this afternoon.
Okay.
There we go. So let's go ahead and start, and then we're going to go to closed session here shortly anyways. So are you ready, City Clerk?
Mayor, I have Councilmember Carnevale on the phone. Do you want me to go ahead and get him situated, or do you want to get started and see if we can figure it out along the way?
No, let's get started, and then he can join us in closed session.
Okay. We'll add that to the record in just a minute. So yeah, just hold on tight just a minute. Okay, sorry about that. I'm ready when you are.
All right, go ahead.
Would you want to call the meeting to order? I'm sorry, or did you already do that?
No, I'm ready whenever you are.
We are ready to go.
All right, good afternoon. Today's Wednesday, January 13th, 2021. This is the study session of the City Council for the City of Cathedral City. This meeting shall now come to order. City Clerk, can you proceed with the roll call, please?
Councilmember Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Ross. She's muted.
I'm here.
Okay. We have Councilmember Carnevale who's trying to get logged in, so he will be participating in the meeting.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez.
Here.
And Mayor Gregory.
Here. All right, the next item is agenda finalization. Are there any changes to the agenda? All right, seeing none, then we're going to move right into our closed session. Remember, council members, you will need to log off of this meeting and log on to the closed session. We will see you there. We will reconvene here at 3:30. Mr. City Attorney, could you please read the item for the closed session?
I'll be happy to do that, Mayor. We have one item today. It's an item of existing litigation. The case is Moreno versus City of Cathedral City. If there are any members of the public in attendance who have questions with regard to this item, they could address those now. If not, we're ready to recess.
Very good. So if you're on Zoom and would like to make a comment on our closed session item, you could please raise your hand using the icon that you'll find at the bottom of your screen, either in the participants section, or if you'll tap on your screen, depending on what kind of device you have, or if you're on the telephone, if you'll dial *9. City Clerk, do you see anyone with their hand raised?
There are no hands raised at this time.
All right, well then we'll proceed into closed session, and we will be back at this meeting at 3:30. Thank you.
He said 3:30. That's why I gathered myself up. Okay, I got all excited. Because I'm not set up, I don't have your links.
They're in your email. You're logged in right here, right? Oh.
Permanently. Because I've never set this computer up. I don't even know if my emails are here, are they?
Yes.
Okay.
He logged in with her, right? Did you which password?
I did.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
I'll just do it again on here and
No,
then,
they're putting me on the computer.
oh, they're good, all right.
Yeah, thank you so much.
How do you turn on that computer?
I have no idea because I was on the meeting. I did it.
All right, I'll tell them it'll be just 1 minute. Okay, Councilmember Ross will be on in just 1 minute. She had an internet outage at her home, and so at the last minute had to come down here, and so we're working with her in an office to get her on, and it will just be a second. Now I can have my agenda back. She had my iPad, and so I suddenly realized, oh, that means my agenda is gone. Uh-huh. Well, I can still put her on this. Oh, Ed Warline says we're watching you in closed session.
session of the City of Cathedral City. City Attorney, do we have anything to report out of closed session?
Yes, Mayor, the City Council did meet and discuss its one item of existing litigation on closed session. Although you did have discussion with Council and your Administrative Services Director, there's no reportable action at this time. And that does conclude the matter and my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next item is the statement of participation and public comment. We want to welcome everyone for joining us via the web or on channel 17 or via Zoom. And we'll now be taking public comment from any members of the public on items and topics not appearing on our study session agenda. The posted agenda outlined the process to join our video conference on Zoom, either using an internet connected device or by telephone. If any members of the public are with us on Zoom and have a comment they wish to make on an item not on the agenda, please use the raise hand function found in the participant menu at the bottom of your screen. For some devices, the raised hand function becomes visible once you tap your screen. And for those joining us by telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. The clerk will call on you when it's your turn to speak, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. I do see one hand in the waiting room right now. City Clerk, if you'd like to take over that function.
Okay, so the first speaker is going to be Sammy Flores.
Yeah, hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, Mr. Flores, welcome. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. My name is Sammy Flores, a Cathedral City resident and labor advocate. I'm here to ask that you consider mandating larger retail and grocery stores in our community to pay their workers $5 in hazard pay. In December, Long Beach City Council voted unanimously to move forward with a $4 per hour hazard pay increase for the next 120 days at least. Soon after, LA City Council President Nuri Martinez and Councilmember O'Farrell proposed a motion that would require large grocery brands to provide their employees with an extra $5 an hour. In these cases, larger grocers are defined as those with at least 300 employees nationwide. When I spoke with you on the phone, Councilmember Gregory, you were asking if this would be prudent. So back in September, the Desert Sun reported that public health officials found that some of the biggest outbreaks in Riverside County were in grocery stores. Further, LA Times reported in an article that illustrated the struggles of frontline workers, including Barbara Hughes, a cashier at Food for Less in Palmdale, said that she put in 70 hours because her colleagues were out with COVID. She told herself, it's stressful, but you got to go to work. That stress that Barbara is facing is the same stress that people are facing in our community. The stress of not having enough money for food, for rent, for car insurance, etc. And this is such a large stressor that workers who are sick will continue to go to work regardless. I've seen this as I've worked in the retail industry as well. And I think this lack of accumulation during the pandemic speaks to a larger issue. Just a couple years ago, the Economic Policy Institute released an analysis regarding the productivity pay gap. Since 1979, pay and productivity have diverged. For instance, from 1979 to 2018, net productivity rose 69.6%, while hourly pay of typical workers essentially stagnated. So that means that although Americans are working more productively than ever, the fruits of their labor have been primarily accrued for those at the top. On correspondence, the Center for Economic and Policy Research analyzed what wages would be in 2020 had the minimum wage remained parallel to productivity. And they found that the minimum wage, if it was in step with productivity growth since 1968, it would have been at $24 today. So I think this pandemic is demonstrating the inequalities that have always existed in our nation, those with wealth and capital exploiting the working class folks of our community. And this starts, and so, I ultimately believe that hazard pay is racial and economic justice for low-income workers. Hazard pay would bring our community closer to receiving fair compensation and the opportunity for our workers to accumulate wealth. And in the end, our community's workers have sacrificed their physical and mental well-being for the well-being of our community. And now I ask that you make a sacrifice and fight for the well-being of our workers. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Flores, for your comments. City Clerk, or is there anyone else?
I see no other hands, Mayor.
All right, then we'll move to our study session item 3A, data summarizing the effects of short-term vacation rentals in Cathedral City. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This item was prepared to bring together in one place a summary of all the data that led council to the conclusion that an ordinance update needed to be put into place related to short-term vacation rentals. So to present this information, I have pulled together information from a number of departments, from the police department relating to calls for service and criminal activity that they have handled. I also have information that was provided by the Code Enforcement Department related to other calls, non-police calls related to short-term vacation rentals. We have some information on the revenue impact of short-term vacation rentals and what would remain after the implementation of Ordinance 842, and we have some housing market data, both unique to Cathedral City and Valley-wide. So we have been very careful in compiling this to make sure that we didn't double count any cases. So you will notice in the police section that'll go first, there's a lot more calls for service to them beginning in November. That's because on November 12th, we put in place the special team devoted to STVR enforcement. That is under the police department, so the data related to that team shows up in the police department. Prior to November 12th, 2020, calls for service that went either to the hotline or through Go Request show up on the code enforcement section of the report. And the only thing that you have in the police section are calls that went directly to police. So you'll see a big difference in the data when we hit that November date. Also, Sandra Molina, who put together the code enforcement data for us, was very careful to make sure that if there were multiple calls related to the same incident, that it was only from the same caller, that it only counted as one call. If, however, there were calls from two different residences about the same case, then that counts as two calls. So we tried to be really careful to be accurate in putting together this data for you. I also will point out that we used October of 2019 as the start date for the data we put together. That's when Sandra joined the city, and we're confident that the data moving forward from that date is accurate. So that's why you see the period from October 2019, and it actually goes through the end of November of 2020 as the time period covered in this. So unless there's any comments related to that introduction, I will ask Chief Crum to take over. There is a presentation. Tracy will be sharing the screen on that, and Chief Crum will be providing the narrative information on this. When he is finished, we'll move into Sandra Molina's portion of the presentation, and then I will handle the last sections myself. If at any point there are any questions, I think as we go along is a good way to handle that. Although if you prefer to wait till the end, that is fine as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Crum.
Thank you, sir. And good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members. Happy New Year. This is the first I've gotten to see all of you in one location here. And also I say good afternoon to our community and city staff. Are you going to put the slideshow up for me, Tracy?
I'm attempting to.
Okay.
Of course. It worked when we tried it. Ugh. For some reason, I'm not, oh, here, there we go. Can you see it all?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yes, thank you. So this afternoon, council members, I'm here to discuss the 2019 through 2020 short-term vacation rental stats for all of you. And this, as the city manager indicated earlier, this is from the police department calls for service. Between October 19 and November 2020, the communications center at the police department received a total of 809 short-term vacation rental related calls for service. As you can see in the bar graph, hopefully you all can see it. You see each month based on calls for service received within the communications center. Our lowest month was January of 2020, where the police department only received 19 total calls for service. Our highest month was November of 2020, when we took in a total of 136 calls for service into our dispatch center. Of note, going from June 2020 through November of 2020, we see steady increases in a few of those months during that time frame. Next slide, please. Of the 809 calls for service regarding short-term vacation rentals, and breaking down those calls for service, we noticed that several of the complaints were regarding disruptive and in some cases illegal behavior by short-term vacation rental renters and guests, including loud late night parties, crowds coming in and out of residential neighborhoods, and increased criminal activity.
Chief Crum, may I ask you a question, please? This is Nancy Ross.
Yes, ma'am.
On your last slide, you had two different colors in your graph. Can you tell me the differentiation?
Yes, 2019 is orange.
I
and
see. And
2020 is blue.
And then can you also hypothesize on why, as the pandemic got worse and worse, the numbers got higher and higher? Do you think more people were just traveling because they were housebound?
I believe,
or?
well, I believe we could certainly equate the higher numbers calls for service on a couple of factors. One being the pandemic itself. I believe our community and surrounding communities, even throughout the state, were growing weary of the pandemic and the various lockdowns that were put into place. And I think in some respects, people chose to travel. And we became one of those destination cities as a result of a place to escape reality is kind of the best way for me to put it. Other than that, I don't have specific factors or causes as to seeing such an increase towards the latter half of 2020.
And then lastly, and I don't know if you have this answer, it might be Charlie, was it just the early December when we actually prohibited STVRs? Is that correct? December 6th, maybe? Maybe 8th?
That's correct. The most recent the most recent order that affected that operation of short-term vacation rentals and the hospitality industry in general was effective December 6th.
Thank you.
Chief, also around June, that's when the state mandate was also lifted in regards to STVRs. Is that correct, Charlie? That's why the uptick that STVR started operating again around June or July, I believe.
That was lifted on June 12th.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to break down for council and keeping in mind of the 809 total calls for service that came into the dispatch center during our previously stated timelines, 15 of those calls resulted in a crime report that took place at a short-term vacation rental location. Of those 15, 9 resulted in arrests being made by the police department. In total, in that timeline, we issued 52 citations that were issued by the police department. Of another interest, I wanted to also show the community and the council and city staff a breakdown of average time that a police officer is spending on an STVR related call for service. And that average time is 21 minutes and 46 seconds per call for service.
Chief,
Next slide.
can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, when you have some of those calls, it's not just one officer that shows up to these calls. Sometimes there's numerous officers that show up to these calls. So the amount of time will be greatly increased by that. Is that correct?
It is correct, but what I did was break it down on average per call. We spend total personnel. We spend 21 minutes and 46 seconds at that call for service.
Okay,
but you are correct. Some of those calls are multiple officers responding, but not every officer will stay till the end of the call necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse
You're
me,
welcome.
Chief.
Yes, sir.
For clarity, on the burglary residential, is that mean where they were staying, they stole something from there, or was it in the neighborhood was the burglary? The burglary, I guess, is breaking into a house or a car or something?
That's correct, and I'll get into that in my next slide.
Okay, I'll wait. Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. So in breaking down the 15 calls for service that I spoke about earlier, that resulted in crime reports being taken by the police department. One was an attempted murder. This particular crime occurred in the 68,000 block of Tachiva. That was an event where it was an employer-based retreat that was held at the short-term vacation rental at that location. During the time of these co-workers at this work retreat, an argument broke out, which ended up in a double stabbing that occurred at that location, in which an arrest was made by the police department. The second crime I want to talk about is the sexual assault. That crime occurred in the 30,000 block of Winter Road. And on this particular event, our victim was attending a party that was being held at the short-term vacation rental on Winter Road. And during the course of the party, she was drugged. In other words, her drink appeared to have been spiked. And once she was rendered unconscious, she was taken to another location where she was sexually assaulted. So as the police department did the investigation, we learned that the victim had been drugged at the vacation rental. However, she was assaulted at a second location. And one of the other assaults I would like to talk about briefly occurred in the 30,000 block of Avenida Eximino. This particular short-term vacation rental during this weekend was hosting 3 families who were renting this location. And during the course of their weekend, both the police department and fire department were dispatched to the location regarding near drowning of a child. And in that particular case, we ended up conducting a child endangerment investigation, which was forwarded to the district attorney's office for filing. And to go back to Councilman Carnevale's question regarding residential burglaries, in the 5 residential burglaries that I have on this slide, you are correct. Those thefts occurred at the vacation rental. So for example, renters left after their weekend stay, and the owners of the vacation rentals in these cases were typically the victims where items had been stolen from their vacation rental itself. Does that answer your question, Councilman Carnevale?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You are welcome. And if there are no other questions related to the actual breakdown of the Part 1 crimes, I'm ready to move to the next slide. So looking at our compliance team, and as the city manager indicated, this team, with support of this city council, we were able to get this team up and running. They actually went live on November 13th of 2020. And I wanted to break down for the council and the community the number of calls for service that this team has handled in that short time frame, being November 13th through November 30th of 2020. 517 total calls have been handled by this team. What's important on that number is 136 of those calls were short-term vacation rental related. 110 of the 136 were actually handled by this new compliance team, and the remaining 26 STVR related calls were handled by our patrol officers. In breaking that data down, ideally, the 26 calls for service that were handled by police officers tended to occur prior to November 13th of 2020. And during the month of November, more so in the 2-week timeline of November 13th through the 30th, our team did issue 12 citations during that short 2-week period.
Chief, were those citations issued for illegal occupancy during a time period that they weren't allowed to be, or are you just talking about the November period of time?
Just the 2 weeks in November, yes.
Have you subsequently began ticketing people for actual occupancy?
We have, if we can establish the violation, and we are noticing that many of our calls for service currently, the renters are actually long-term rentals. In other words, they're staying more than 30 days. So they're not currently violating the current orders that are in place, but we are investigating each and every call that we do receive.
Chief, legally, 30 days or less is considered a short-term vacation rental?
Yes, I believe it's under 30 days.
Okay.
So I do happen to know that it is a policy now of some of the STVR owners to give them 30-day contracts for the weekend.
Right. And that is requiring us to follow up. So if we do make contact with a renter that indicates they have a 30-day or longer stay, then our team is following up on that to ensure that that is in fact the case. If it's not the case, then an administrative citation will be issued in those cases.
And Chief, just to clarify, you're not saying that there have been no citations issued for that violation. You're just saying not all of the calls have ended up in citation. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Now, Chief, are we keeping records to make sure that we don't get multiple calls from the same property and on different weekends, and there's different people at that property stating that each had a 30-day contract?
Well, we are responding to every complaint that we receive.
Yes, but per property, are we keeping records to make sure that, for instance, weekend number 1, X, Y, and Z leaves the property. Weekend number 2, they have a 30-day contract. Weekend number 2, Mr. Smith is renting the property for 30 days. Week number 3 is a different property, a different person, same property. Are we keeping records of what's going on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm ready for the next slide. The other component is our partners in public safety here in our city, and that I wanted to break down the fire department calls for service that related to short-term vacation rentals, again, using the same October 2019 through November of 2020. And you can see that our fire department responded to a total of 241 short-term vacation rental calls for service during that timeline. And 56 of those calls were October through December of 2019, and 185 have occurred from January 1 of 2020 through November 30th of 2020. Specifically looking at the graph, which is to my right, the bar graph, you can see that the majority of fire department calls for service that had occurred in this timeline, 183 being medical aids. The second highest number is 35, which is public service responses where they have called the fire department to assist them. Perhaps they've fallen and other type situations like that would not be classified as a medical aid by our fire department. Specifically, I want to talk about 2 incidents that our fire department handled, one being in July of 2020, in which our fire department was dispatched to the 28,000 block of West Natoma, and that resulted in a fire from a barbecue at a short-term vacation rental. And secondly, our fire department in November of 2020 handled a fire in the 68,000 block of 30th Avenue, and that fire was caused by a faulty pool equipment. So we have our fire department has handled 2 fire incidents really in short order, both in July and in November of 2020. Looking at the average time spent on these calls for service of our fire department, it is on average 37 minutes and 46 seconds per call for service that our fire department members are on these calls. And I believe, Tracy, that is my last slide, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to my part of this presentation.
Are there additional questions for the chief?
Yeah, Chief, were there any parking citations that you have on record from any of these STVRs as well?
Yes, I did not break those down by sheer numbers, but our team is issuing a very large number of parking citations, whether they on view them, in other words, they see them themselves, or members of the community are reporting them, and we are going out and issuing citations as a result of that complaint.
Were those citations a part of your presentation here, or they're in addition to?
In addition to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, if there's no other questions, let's move on to code compliance. Sandra Molina.
Yes, thank you, members of the City Council. So I'm going to go ahead and provide data from our Code Compliance Division from October to November 12th, 2020. Our sources for short-term vacation rental complaints come through the hotline, which is a 24/7 hotline that's staffed. Also from Go Request, which is both web-based and app-based onto a smartphone. And then we do get referrals, not very many, but a few referrals from the police department and other sources such as email, fire department, or phone itself. But for that time period, we have 761 complaints. And as indicated by City Manager McClendon, we were very careful to make sure that we did not double count the numbers. And calls that directly went to dispatch also were not included in our stats. That's included in the police department stats. So our complaints by month, and Tracy, I think you might have go back one, please. Yeah, so now go forward. There you go. Thank you very much. We broke down our complaints, the 761, by the type of complaint that we got, the complaint category. And as you can see, music and noise by far is the biggest number of complaints that we get. It's over 60% of the total calls for that time period. During that time, the second highest number of calls we received were during the emergency order that the city had and the county had as well. With regard to short-term vacation rentals, we had 96 during that time period that the orders were in effect. Tracy, can you go to the next one? Thank you. So we also have broken down our complaints by month during that time period. And as you can see, during the times of June, July, August, and September, which are the summer months, we did have a higher number of complaints. During that time, again, the majority of our complaints are noise and music related. For instance, in June, 38 of those 69 calls were for music and noise. And in July, 105 of them, about 70% of the calls were music and noise complaints. And that's consistent. In August, 60 of the calls were for music and noise. And in September, it was 58. In October, it was 61. So as the stats show, music and noise is probably our biggest complaints that we received.
Sandra, quick question.
Sure.
Out of the music and noise, how many of those calls resulted in a citation? If you have that information.
No, I don't have that information. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. So if I could just follow up really quick on Councilmember Gutierrez's question. We don't have that information. A lot of the times it was after the fact. We would come in, after the weekend and follow up and also contact the police department. So we were not having that 24/7 coverage during that time. It was more difficult to inspect or investigate the complaint and then results in citations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, I'll speak to this one. If there there are often questions asked about how many of our short-term vacation rentals are in what I call the open communities versus the HOA communities, and what is our revenue. And we've always said that about a third of our licensed STVRs are in HOA neighborhoods. It turns out that for 1920, exactly 1/3 of our licensed short-term vacation rentals are in HOA communities, 130 and 490 in of the 390 total. Bottom lines are the revenue that the city receives: business licenses, permits, and transaction occupancy tax, commonly known as TOT. I would draw your attention to the far right-hand column in red. That's the revenue from the licenses in the HOA communities that would be unaffected by the ordinance. And also I would note on this, the permit revenue, all of this was for the 1920 fiscal year, which ended June 30th. So none of this in terms of the permit revenue reflects the increased fees that went into effect in October. Tracy. Now, the other question that we're commonly asked and is an issue that many in the community have brought up is, what effect do short-term rentals have regarding housing availability? And so we did gather some data. It's difficult to make a direct causal relationship. However, these items are undeniable. Housing prices in Cathedral City increased by 19.9% from November 2019 through November 2020. That was a one-year period, a 20% increase in housing prices. Now, if you own a home here, that's good news for you. That means your housing, the value of your home has gone up. If you're looking to buy or rent a home, that makes it harder and harder for you to achieve affordability. And there just is not enough housing available in Cathedral City, and actually statewide, that's a recognized problem. The legislature has taken all kinds of actions to mandate that we increase our housing supply and a number of things like that. Having homes removed from the residential market and operated like hotels for recreational STVR purposes further exacerbates the effect of the already tight housing market. One of the goals of the council in adopting the STVR restrictions is to protect housing availability for more local, year-round working families, seniors, and other residents. And the housing pinch is not limited to just Cathedral City. Housing inventory valley-wide dropped by 42% over the past year. And what that is a measure of is the number of homes on the market for sale has decreased. And so we do not have that particular number just for Cathedral City, but I think that you would find the same trend if you looked at just Cathedral City data. All right, and I think that concludes the presentation. So any of us would be available for questions, and I assume there are probably attendees who desire to comment on this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. City Manager. So council, if you have any additional questions, you can ask them now. Otherwise, we'll take public comments and then come back to you for any additional questions or comments. So just questions.
I just have a quick question for Ms. Molina. One of your graphs listed unpermitted houses. How would somebody calling in on a report know that a home was unpermitted?
Yes, various ways. A lot of the calls that we got regarding potentially unpermitted short-term vacation rentals were from members of the community that are very much aware of what are licensed rentals, which ones are licensed. They're also very aware of what goes on in the neighborhood. So they see activity that leads them to believe that there's short-term vacation rental activity going on. And so that's the bulk of the calls we received from neighbors.
And did you find that bear fruit, that most of those calls where they said that house has somebody staying in it and it's not an STVR, that they were in fact vacationers, or did that not pan out?
We did it in some instances, and I don't have the data to break that down, but what we would do when we got those complaints is we would first try to see if we could find an advertisement on Airbnb or VRBO or some other online source. And if we did find it, then we would write the citation. If we were able to make contact with the occupants, we would try to get information that way. In instances where we couldn't do either of those two, then we would attempt to monitor the activity.
And then my last question, and I don't really know who this would go to, but as of the reporting period that you're talking about, what has been the citation dollar amount issued?
Well, during the time period that code compliance was issuing citations, our fee schedule for an unlicensed short-term vacation rental was $5,000.
No, I'm sorry. I meant all the different citations you've issued for a variety of things. Do you have a conglomerate total of what the total amount of citation dollar amount you have issued is?
I don't have that offhand, but that's something that we can obtain.
Thank you.
Now, Sandra,
if I could, Mayor, I'm sorry. On Councilmember Ross's question, I think that's a good one. But I also want everyone to understand that issuing a citation and collecting on it are two different things. And there's a legal appeal process and a number of other things that come into play. So
I understand that, Charlie.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, City Manager. I understand. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Charlie, quick question for you. Do you know what the cost of a long-term rental is?
in terms of the permit to
yes, a yearly permit, yes.
I don't. It's not very much. Is Tammy on here? No.
Yeah, I'm here. It's the annual permit is like a business license is like $36 and some change, but we have to do an inspection, which makes it, no, we don't do inspections on those. Sorry, I think it's $36.
Okay. Now, Sandra, this question is for you and also for the police chief. Now, can you tell us a little bit about how the relationship between the police department and the code enforcement, how you guys work together when calls come in and citations are issued? Who handles what? How does it work? Can you kind of explain to us and give us a little bit of information behind that?
Sure, I can go first. So the way it's broken up right now is code compliance has a STVR analyst that's full-time that handles the administrative, the licensing component of the STVR license. And the police department, of course, has the compliance officers. Also, they have a full-time assistant, administrative assistant. And that part of the team responds to all calls. When they issue citations, that is done over on their end. But we do communicate because weekly they provide us a report of the calls for service for that week so that we can put together a monthly report at the end of each month. So our teams communicate on a daily basis. In addition, we meet weekly to go over whatever issues have come up during the previous week or during that week, and we talk about them and resolve them. So we've been working very closely, and I think it's been working really well. And Chief can also add to that, I'm sure.
Yes, thank you. And that was a very good summary that Sandra just gave all of you. She is correct. As you know, the police department side of the compliance issue is in the field. and we field a compliance officer 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So each compliance officer is assigned to a patrol team. And then in the office component, we also have our analyst that works closely with code compliance's analyst. And I'm also moving a civilian supervisor over to that side because there's quite a bit of work, having 4 officers out in the field and quite a bit of citations being issued and administrative work that's being conducted. But they do meet regularly. I am personally not part of those weekly meetings, but I do know that they communicate on a daily basis and meet weekly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Councilmember Carnevale.
Thank you. This question could either be for Chief Crum or Sandra Molina. From what I understand, STVRs are supposed to be closed down now. Is that correct? That is correct. But okay, thanks. But during the daily reports that I get from the chief every day, I keep seeing STVRs 5 in the daytime, 7 at night. So are you issuing citations? If you're going to STVR complaints, shouldn't citations be given immediately if they're supposed to be shut down?
Well, what you're seeing is the calls for service that those compliance officers handled that were STVR related. That does not necessitate necessarily that they're going to encounter a violation. So we could get someone that calls in a complaint that an STVR is being rented, and our officers arrive and they're seeing no evidence of a rental taking place. So what you're seeing is how many calls they handled that shift related to a short-term vacation rental, but that does not equate necessarily to a violation having occurred at that location.
Okay, thank you. And since this ends at November 20th, this calls for service, have you seen, both of you, either or have seen a decrease in calls and complaints? Are they pretty much the same?
In speaking to what we've seen, our gauge has been in the past what comes in through the hotline and what comes in through Go Request, and we are seeing through the hotline a decrease in the number of calls.
Decrease.
A lot of the properties we thought we would see that we got a lot of calls in the past, we're not seeing that now that we have 24/7 compliance. So, but a number of calls do go directly to the police department, which we don't see.
Okay, Chief, would you think this new process with the code compliance is very successful and it's working, doing what you thought it would do?
Well, I personally think it's been an outstanding program. I think from both sides of the situation, we're able to validate or invalidate complaints. And I think that's been a big deal in our city. And it's allowed us that 24/7 coverage where we can handle very quickly complaints related to STVRs and come to a very quick finish to them and disposition to those particular issues that are occurring in our city. So I believe it has been extremely effective. And I thank council for creating the opportunity for me to bring that to the police department side and deliver that level of service that our community deserves.
I agree, Chief. Thank you. Thank you, Sandra.
All right. Before we move on, I see that our fire chief is with us. I don't know if he had anything to add or just here to answer questions. Chief Muir?
He was here in case there are any questions. Chief, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think the police chief pretty much hit this, the types of runs that we've encountered over the course of the last year, and I pretty much covered it.
All right, thank you so much. All right, Councilmember Lamb, did you have a question?
Yeah, I thank you so much. I didn't have a question. I just wanted to make a comment.
All right, well, let's have public, if you don't mind, let's have public comments, and then we're going to come back and let all of council make comments or ask additional questions if prompted. So thank you so much. Okay, City Clerk, it looks like we're ready to go to public comment. I will turn it over to you to call those up, and each public commenter, please, turn yourself on when you get moved over, and you will have 3 minutes.
Okay, so at this time, I have two hands that are raised, and the first one is going to be Alan Cavallo.
All right, Mr. Carvalho, I see you coming up. Looks like you're still muted. There you go. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Chief Crum. Phenomenal presentation. And yes, I think that we all feel a whole lot safer that you're handling the situation in a way that the city has really actually never done before. And I thank you for that. And thank you for the City Council for having this meeting. It's a big concern for the entire community. What seems to be an issue for some who are in favor of a ban on short-term vacation rentals, it's a concern about having our neighborhoods become commercial zones. I think it's important to note that if you are a resident of Cathedral City and you own property for rent, you are required to pay your annual fee for the business license. So all those who complain that they don't want our city to become a neighborhood of commercialism, that horse is already out of the barn. Our city collects annual fees and is thereby embracing the concept of our neighborhoods already being a sense of small hotels. The other feature that is troubling is that we seem to have an issue with outside money supporting a no vote on Measure B, but many of us have had no real issues with the recent election of 2 senators in Georgia and the millions that came into that state as a result. I believe it's disingenuous to be upset only with outside agitators unless you don't agree with them. I hope that the get off my lawn attitude will change and we will instead see the beauty and value of new neighbors who are in many cases will become new longtime residents. Speaking for myself, about 12 years ago, we came to the Valley for the first time and we were so taken by the winter weather and the natural beauty, we eventually purchased not only just one property, but a condo in Palm Desert, a cottage for weekends in Pioneer Town, and a long-term rental property on Vista. Many of our tourists and visitors will come here to spend their money and their time and could very well become future retirees here in our valley full-time. As a resort town with a limited amount of hotel space for visitors, providing alternative housing through short-term vacation rentals, not to mention the regular stream of revenue that it produces, we are here to welcome our tourists and visitors with open arms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carvalho. City Clerk, if you go to the next.
So the next speaker is Boris Stark.
Hello, Mr. Stark, if you would unmute yourself.
Good evening, City Council and City staff. Thank you for your time and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I want to echo Chief Crum's comments on the City Council supporting and providing funding for enforcement against short-term rentals. I think that's a great step forward. During the presentation, I had a couple of questions that I think would be of importance to present to the community. The crime reports as presented, which occurred at STVRs, and also response times by the fire department as well. I wonder how do those compare towards the overall measurements in the city of Cathedral City? How many non-STVRs calls police have responded to that there was a potential attempted murder? And things of that sort. I think that would help put the community at ease and into perspective on really what have STVRs done in comparison to the full-time residents that live in the city and the crime that happens in the city, not just STVR. And the second thing, what I think would be helpful for the community to see is to also understand, out of so many calls that were presented earlier by Ms. Molina, how many of those noise complaints and music complaints actually did end up being cited? Showing 700 calls for noise and music, where we know for a fact that multiple neighbors are calling on the same property within several minutes of each other for the same guest, and we know that they're being targeting vacation rentals. We have proof, we have evidence. How many can that data be provided to the community? I think that would be really important to see. And lastly, out of so many calls that have happened, and not all of them have resulted in citations, I wanted to understand and see what is the city staff and what is being done against people who are calling complaints against short-term rentals that don't result in complaints, callers that call every single day that use city resources that can be allocated towards different efforts. So somebody filing false reports, how is that being treated within the city and within compliance and police department? And are those people being cited for filing false complaints? And are those calls being investigated for wasting city resources? Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. Okay, City Clerk, do we have anyone else who's raised their hand?
I see no other hands raised at this time, Mayor.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, we'll return it back to council for any questions or if it's the time for any comments that you wish to make. This would be appropriate. You just kind of wave your hand at me and we'll kind of call you. All right, Councilmember Lamb.
Yes, thank you so much. And I want to thank Police Chief Crum and Sandra for excellent, very readable, understandable presentations. That was great. I just wanted to say, as percentages are, it's tough to figure out or understand what 20% is. But in the current, there was a current real estate magazine in the Sunday edition of our local Desert Sun, saying that the current availability of homes, whether they were attached or detached, throughout the Coachella Valley was approximately 1,860. And following the 2008 recession in the housing market, we averaged 8,000 units available. So the difference between the availability then, 8,000 was horrific, and now we have about 1,850. So that just gives you some way to relate to what the availability is throughout the Coachella Valley, and that directly impacts Cathedral City. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Anyone else? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, Mr. Muir, Chief Muir. Now, out of those calls for service to the fire department that were dialed in, do you know what the medical aid calls were? Do you recall if they had to do with people passing out from drinking, drugs, or falling, or what those calls were? Do you have any information on that?
No, we don't track as far as we do track the type of medical aids, but we didn't deduct that out of the data. We could certainly do some of that, but as we talk about it with our crews and such, the feedback that we get from our crews, they're pretty keen to the idea or the concern in the city about STVRs, and they give us a lot of feedback when there's something that may be out of the normal. And when it's specific to the fire department type calls, outside of a few that were already mentioned, none of them really stick out. But we could do some data mining to see if there's more information there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, who's next? Councilmember Carnevale. I think you're still muted.
Hate when I do that. I just want to go on record and thanking Charlie McClinton, our city manager, and the police chief and the fire chief and Sandra Molina for putting all these facts together. These are facts and they're accurate. I know we get a lot of from the other side. We're making these up. It's not true, but these facts are true, and some of them are disturbing, and that's what disturbs me the most. That possibly the other side that want these STVRs don't understand the importance of improvement our neighborhood safety. An attempted murder, a rape, burglaries. They don't want that in their yard, and I don't want it in this city here. So what you put together here, Charlie, just convinces me even more, and I hope it just convinces the constituents and residents and property owners with STVRs that there is a problem here, and it's ongoing, and it's not getting any better. You can see that it keeps going up, especially with COVID coming on now. The safety, not only for our residents, but for policemen, for our code compliance, for our firemen that have to go out on these calls. So, returning the neighborhoods back to neighborhoods, I think this is a good start to what we're doing here. And again, thank you, Charlie, for putting this together and bringing it to light. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. So if I could just jump in, I don't really have questions, but there were a couple of questions that were raised in the comments. So I just wanted to quickly address those. One of them was response times. And it's really not the gist of this presentation, so I don't want to put anyone on the spot. I don't really know if we need to have numbers anyways, but the question had to do with basically that people would feel better that there were a number, even though there were incidents, because the response times were so quick. So I just want to confirm with you, either or both of the chiefs, when it comes to response time, my belief is that you respond by priority, but not whether it's an STVR or another residence or a business or those. That's not part of your response time. Is that correct?
From the police department,
go ahead.
From the, you are correct, Mayor. We don't differentiate whether it's an STVR related call versus any other type of call for service related to noise, disturbances, assaults, things of that nature. You know, in the police department, when we look at priority 0 and 1 calls, we try to maintain a 7-minute response time or less. That's certainly my goal moving forward as well. But we do not get there quicker or in less time based on whether a location is a rental or not.
Thank you, Chief Crum. Chief Muir?
Yeah, and the same thing goes for the fire department. The way our stations are situated, where our goal is a 5-minute response time. And we're blind really to the type of home that it is when responding, and that really doesn't play a part.
And I believe all of us would agree that's as it should be. So yeah. Thank you for that, that response. There was also, I believe this already got explained, but this is a Sandra Molina question, I believe. You talked earlier about noise and music citations and the fact that you did not have 24/7 staff. And so many of the times when you investigated those, they were after the fact. And really a lot of what you were doing, it sounded like, was follow-up where you were contacting the responsible party to at least let them know that there was a complaint. Either you were contacting them or the hotline was, so that they could take care of it. So there was a question about how many of those were cited or why a lot of those weren't cited. Am I understanding that correct? Is really, it doesn't mean that there wasn't noise and music, but you weren't really equipped, is what I heard, at least, to do that immediate type of follow-up.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And the majority of the time when we did the follow-up, because we weren't able to respond at the time of the complaint, it was really verifying that the local contact responded within that 45-minute time frame. And if there was a citation, it was typically related to that and not necessarily that there was noise.
Right. That's what I heard too. I just want to make sure that I heard it right. And Chief Crum, in the short time that you've had the team, you have had, of course, some noise and music complaints. And while you may not have the data, are you finding that from your crews that when they go that there are, I don't know if you have frequently or sometimes or nearly always, that there is some noise and music that then is addressed, maybe not with a citation, but is addressed?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, majority of what we're dealing with right now with the emergency orders in place is complaints regarding actual occupancy of rental locations. So we are addressing that. As you know, as council knows, we are out there to do that. Our compliance team is very quick to handle these complaints, and they are also very good at mitigating these complaints, whether they result in a violation or not.
Right, thank you. And I think the last thing I heard in the comments, which is kind of related to this, is, and I've heard it come up before, is this point that's trying to be made that sometimes there are people that call a lot, and somehow that means that they are making false complaints, especially if when code followed up, they didn't observe and then make a citation. And now at the point of the police department, now the way it used to be done is somebody would call in. If somebody called into the hotline would call the reporting party or the responsible party and tell them to stop, basically, especially noise and music, those types of things, or even parking, trash, tell them that there was a complaint and they needed to fix the behavior. And my understanding is most of the time, of course, code wasn't on, and it wasn't a priority for code anyways for most of those types of calls. So they would follow up again later, and then often, which we would expect most of the time, the problem was taken care of. And so there was no code didn't necessarily personally observe the violation, and they didn't issue a citation because it was taken care of. But it doesn't mean that when the person called and made the complaint that the problem wasn't occurring. So I don't know if anybody or even the city manager has any comment on that.
I can comment on that, Mayor. You've hit the nail on the head with what the problem was prior to November 12th, which is people often had to call repeatedly because there wasn't anybody on duty to go respond to the call. And we sort of trusted and relied on the fact that the responsible party, when the hotline called them, would call the renters and say, knock it off, turn down the music. And many times they would, but often it required a respondent to call again and again and again because it wasn't handled. And ultimately, those are the ones that often ended up then going to the police department because they'd eventually get frustrated and call the police. Now, since November 12th, I think it's going to be a lot easier for us to identify if there really are complainants who are calling unnecessarily, because now we're able to get there often in 5 minutes or less from the time the call comes in. And so we can document, was there noise going on and was there not? And one thing we found in some cases, and I think the officers are really good at documenting this in their daily log, sometimes they'll get there and yes, there is noise going on. And if it exceeds the decibel levels allowed, then that's noted and a citation is issued. Sometimes it's less than that. And that's noted in the record as well. And that in itself doesn't necessarily mean that the complaint was false because there was music. It just didn't rise to the level of being a violation of the code. So we're being very careful to document that stuff. And over time, that's going to give us the tools we need to determine if there really are situations where we're getting unfounded complaints. And of course, the code allows us to address that if that's the case. We don't want to do that without good evidence that they are false complaints, because that would have a chilling effect on people letting us know about problems. And we never want people to feel afraid to let us know when something's going on, whether it's related to an STV or not in their neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I mean, that you summed it up very well. So, and I want to thank everyone, as Councilmember Carnevale did. I think you hit it right on the head. We really do appreciate everyone getting this data together. I know, although things have changed recently, that the data hasn't always been compiled in a way that makes it easy to utilize, or even it's still some of the older data, it's hard to make conclusions from. So I do want to thank the chief and Sandra Molina, the chiefs, and all the others that got this together, because I think to me it really shows that there is a serious impact in the neighborhoods from these SDVRs. Somehow we hear from people that it's just not that big of a thing, that they really aren't noticed, they're just nice visitors, and many of them I'm sure are. But the truth of the matter is there's a reason why we have these houses in the residential neighborhoods that are large and have swimming pools. They're not necessarily right next to, in walking distance to, an amenity that people are coming out of town to visit. But they're here because they're a great location, especially in the summer or over holidays, those types of things, to have a gathering, and something you probably wouldn't do in your own neighborhood if you were living in a residential neighborhood, but have a party with a bunch of people and have them at these residential homes in our residential neighborhoods. And I think that there's plenty of evidence showing here that there are impacts, and then there are serious things that happen at those residences. They are impacting our residents, our full-time residents here, or our part-time visitors, you know, that are the more than 30 days. And that it is something that was good that was brought to us, and it's something that we needed to address. So I don't know if some of the other council has comments on what they felt are the what the impacts here that have been outlined today, what it's meant to them, or if they feel any differently. Anyone else? Or Mayor Pro Tem, I see you raising your hand.
Well, thank you. Great comments, great conversation, great study session, and also thank you for all the information, great information that was accumulated. Now, you just summarized that very well, Mayor. One thing that has not been said or talked about is that prior to Sanda's arrival, the information was never recorded or properly recorded. Therefore, we don't have information before her arrival. But that does not necessarily say that there were no complaints prior to such date. There were as many complaints that I received prior to her arrival and after. So let's not forget that. But thank you, very well summarized by everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you everyone for the information. That is the last item on our study session. So, and we did finish our closed session. So we will stand adjourned for our study session, and everyone will be back for our regular session starting at 5:30.
Thank you. See you soon.